So welcome, James. As I said, he's the development manager for schools at the Copyright Licensing Agency. So I'm going to quickly hand over to him. And excellent. And I'll mute so you don't.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. That was a really fascinating first session, actually. I don't mind waiting at all. Sorry about the big portrait. I should have put a trigger warning up, shouldn't I? I've just realised when I've put the slide there. But really, really nice to meet everyone. I, as a teacher, it always inspired curiosity. The library area in the schools, when we were lucky to have a library, it was always a tragedy when we didn't have one. But it's always a fabulous area and a great immersive space for learning and imagination. So really, really pleased that I've been invited this evening. Just a little bit about me. So 20 plus years in education. I tend to use a plus because it gets depressing otherwise. I'm the direct CLA contact for educational establishments. So the Copyright Licensing Agency, I deal with schools, so primary, secondary. I do have colleagues in FE and HE as well. So if you did want to have their details, that's not a problem. But basically, I'm happy to help. My role very much is engaging with schools and organisations just to make sure that we're supporting them with their CLA licence, etc. So hopefully what I'm going to show you this evening is going to be quite useful. And like I say, if you want to carry any conversations on after it, then happy to do that too. I do encourage you to use the chat if you want. I know it's Thursday, we're all feeling a bit kind of deflated. It is the evening, I get that. But if you've got any anecdotes about any copyright that you've had to deal with or otherwise, or if you just want to say hello, it's a nice gesture, it turns strangers into friends. But if you pop anything in the chat, then I'll have a look at it as we go, or Barbara might be kind enough to sort of mention anything towards the end, because I'm aware of time as well. Right, so the name of this actual slideshow, don't worry, I found it online. It comes from me as an IT coordinator when I first started in education. You can see there, hopefully in the middle there, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. It was one of the things that colleagues said to me, naive sentiments around copyright. I was dealing with images taken from websites, photocopying entire books. Plus, I'm sure a lot of stuff which I'm glad I didn't know about. But, this was my first point in which copyright and education sort of met in the middle. And we're all busy people, and sometimes things fall through the gaps. But the idea really for this evening is to just give you a bit of an idea of why the CLA exists, what we actually do, a few common misconceptions around the licenses we provide, as well as around some elements of copyright, what's covered with the license, but also what's not covered with the license. And then at the end, I want to provide some help and support. So some go-tos, which I think will be really great for you guys to use, but also to share with your school community as well. But if there is anything that you feel I've missed off this kind of very whistle-stop tour tonight, then happy to come back if I'm invited and you've not had enough of me. We can talk about other elements for the agenda. But hopefully that makes for some interesting conversation. So, why does the CLA exist? So the Copyright Licensing Agency, for over 4 decades, we've generated about £1.5 billion in collective licensing revenues. So that's been distributed over 200,000 authors and visual artists, publishers. It's not all the big boys and girls, the multinationals. Yes, they need remunerating, but it's also about those smaller content creators that are just trying to put food on the table. So we basically want to work with everyone that deserves recognition for their work. We are a non-for-profit organisation, so we provide blanket licenses so schools can scan, copy, publish material for educational purposes. We basically make sure authors get fair payment for the work, as I said, but in redistributing that money, it really, for us, it's very much about rebalancing the system. Just making sure that everyone involved is getting what they need. And for me as a teacher as well, I think it goes beyond that. It's also about protecting our next generation of content creators, making sure that their voice and ideas matter and they have value. And I think particularly now, we've got a generation that are dealing with so many mediums. We were talking about some of those in the previous conversation. Being so creative and just to know that there could be a career for them. There could be, someone's going to listen to what they say or create or make, and there's value to that. So I just think that's so important. I really do. And for those of you that may be visual learners like myself, I put it into a lovely little diagram. If you look at 1 p.m. there on the clock, this just gives you a bit of an idea of the ecosystem. So, like I said, publishers, authors, artists, they create content, that great material that we have and inspires our pupils and helps with teaching and learning. We then have institutions that purchase our CLA license. And that gives permission for organisations, schools to copy this content and make sure they're not infringing on those copyrights. Organisations could be like the Department for Education. They have a CLA licence for all state schools in England. There is the Scottish Government, the Welsh Government, Northern Ireland. There is for independent schools, organisations like the Independent Association of Prep Schools. So majority of schools are covered. If you feel you're not sure if you are or you're not, then please ask us. We can always make that clear for you. But ultimately, how do we know where this money's going? We don't just dish out money willy-nilly. We have data collection exercises, quite detailed, and we take those from samples of schools that we go into. We very rarely go in, but we ask them to register what they're copying, and that means we've got a good idea then of what work's being used and in what capacity, and we can remunerate the right people. And in which case, that data then is returned to organisations that represent publishers. So people like the PLS, the Publishers Licensing Services, DACS, Design and Artist Copyright Society. They then take those royalty payments and give it to the people that deserve to get remunerated for the work they do. So I think it's a wonderful ecosystem, and it means that we get to put great content and resource in front of our pupils, and the people that create it actually get recognised for their work. So we are, like I said, a not-for-profit organisation. We take the royalties, take away our costs, and then we give the money to the authors and writers, etc. And we are providers of blanket licenses. So essentially, we're creating a solution to a problem. What we're not is, and this is where some people get confused, we're not the copyright police. That is not in our remit. We are very carrot and not stick. We don't sort of prosecute anyone or anything like that. We provide licenses as explained. And we don't give legal advice on copyright issues. It's not within, again, our remit. We can give advice on the licenses that we provide that make sure that you keep from infringing on copyright law. But just to be clear about that, I know that in my short time I've been at the CLA, which has been about 4 months actually, I've still got the cellophane on, but I sometimes get emails where people are looking for a very binary answer around copyright matters. And I think it's almost like they've got an alibi for court if anything happens. That's not what we're here for. We give advice around our licenses, just to be clear. You've got things like the IPO, the Intellectual Property Office, of course, and other institutions which we can recommend for that if you need that to be the case. So just going through some misconceptions around the licensing and also copyright, and it'd be interesting if, like I said, any of you come across this in your experience. These are things that do seem to come up quite regularly, and one thing straight away is this definition of fair use and fair dealing, which is used a lot within the realms of copyright. Now, just to be clear, fair dealing is a legal term, and it's used to establish whether a use of copyright material is lawful or whether it infringes copyright. That is built into UK law. Fair use is in the US, and it's a broader scope. It's not something that we recognise over here. So when we use fair use, it really means nothing in this country. But fair dealing is very much about looking at how, keeping on the right side of copyright permissions. And unfortunately, there is no statutory definition of fair dealing. It's always a matter of fact and degree and impression. So I guess when you're talking about copyright generally and fair dealing with content and materials, there's just a couple of questions you need to sort of ask that just help to keep you on the right side of the tracks. And one is, how would a fair-minded and honest person have dealt with this work? So when you're doing something with content, how would someone of good character and fair mind be working with this material? And also, is what we're doing, would this affect or impact the actual earnings of whoever owns this content? So it's just a couple of questions to kind of pose yourself when you're working with materials, and if you feel there's something that could be an issue that would put you in harm's way, like I said, with copyright infringement. But fair dealing is broken down into a number of different criteria, and you can see there at the top, you can learn more about it with the IPO. The one that we're interested in at the CLA, and the one that you're covered with your CLA license, is about educational uses of illustration for instruction. So, for example, if you are showing an extract of a poem on a board, and you're using it with pupils for the purposes of looking at the language and the vocabulary and the structure, then that is instruction and illustration, and that would be classed as fair dealing under this ruling. Other elements we're not going to worry about this evening: criticism and review, reviewing things to critique it, etc. That's not covered within an educational license because it's not relevant to teaching and learning. But just to put some sort of caveats around those terms there, and just a few other questions and statements that come up quite frequently. There's a true and false there. If you want to put a T or an F in the chat, you can do, but I'm just going to talk through these. If you want to just have a little quiz in your head, that's absolutely fine. No prizes, I'm afraid. But some of the statements that people can get misaligned with about free to view, meaning free to use. A lot of talk there before about Google. So let's talk about images, for example. As with most copyrighted material, just because something's free to view doesn't mean it's free to use. Search engines are finding material, as I'm sure you're aware, from lots of different sources. And so we need to just check the copyright conditions on what we've found on that search engine. It doesn't mean, like I said, that because we've been able to view it, we can then utilize it. So just got to be careful with that one for sure. And another one about schools not being able to use copyrighted materials for their websites without permission. This is an interesting one. There is a difference between websites and learning platforms, etc. The thing with websites is that they are open source. So if you are taking anything, it is for a general audience to look at and view, and sort of that's where we've got to be cautious of using copyright content. It's outside of the confines of our control of who can see that, outside of the school community. Work needs to be registered if you want it copyrighted. So the fact of the matter is, in this country, is there some office that you need to go and register what you've done or work that's been created, whether it be a pupil or yourself? Well, the answer is no. The minute you've created something tangible, as far as we're concerned in law in this country, it is copyrighted. You may put your name on it or otherwise, but it is your property. And this is the difference when it's tangible as opposed to maybe an idea or a concept. So if there's something in your head that you haven't committed to paper or otherwise, then that's not copyrighted. There's no permissions around it. And the same with a concept. If we use the example of James Bond, international British spy, that is IP. That is a protected, copyrighted IP. But you could write another story about a British spy. The concept, the overall idea of a British spy is not copyrighted, as long as it doesn't, sound too similar to Mr. Bond himself. So it's just about knowing what is copyrighted and what isn't, and what that process looks like. Just talking before about the sharing element. So is there a limit as to how much can be copied and shared under the CLA license? Well, there is, absolutely. And we've got lots of literature and material that will help you to display this around schools or libraries if you wish. It's kind of like the Holy Trinity, if you will. Basically, any copying that takes place within the CLA license, you can basically copy whichever of the three options is greater. So if you've got 2 chapters that come to 5% of a book, you can copy both under the license. And these amounts will apply to digital material as well. So we know that things like websites aren't organized in the same way as a print book, for example, but we just advise you to use your best judgment and copy reasonable extracts in line with, this guidance. So when you're copying anything, like I said, if it's an article or a chapter, 5% of the total, whichever is greatest. And if you follow that guideline, it'll generally put you in good stead, and you won't have many problems moving forwards. Again, if you have anything that you feel you wanted to touch base with us on, we're happy to help as much as possible. The converse of the open source website, can you upload copyrighted material? We get asked a lot about online learning platforms. Well, the short answer is yes, you can. Your CLA license will allow you to make many copies that are needed, as long as it's within the reality of what you're trying to achieve. So if I'm copying for a lesson with 30 pupils, I'd probably want 30 copies, maybe 31, one for myself. If I'm copying 300 plus for that lesson, that's probably out of the confines of what would be deemed as necessary. But it's fine to put copies on the VLE or intranet. Just make sure it's secure to your school or college. That's the big difference. It's really an important differential there. Just aware of time, I've just got a few more slides to show you, but I just wanted to talk quickly about what is actually covered by your license and what isn't. So I said the CLA license, it allows you to copy publications from the UK plus about 38 international territories, and it is a blanket educational license. So it gives institutes the right to copy and reuse published material. It just basically means you don't have to spend lots of time and money clearing permission from right holders every single time. So it's a real time saver and also a money saver as well. But the basics are this. You've got to own a copy of what you're copying. If it's a book, a journal, or whatever it might be, you need to just have purchased a copy of it in order for you to be producing more from that. Staff and students at your school, they can receive copies under the license, as we mentioned. That's absolutely fine if it's within kind of a reasonable quantity. You can make as many copies as you need to each student, staff, etc. That's absolutely fine. And also, you can keep the copies for as long as you wish. The only thing that you should be considering, and this might be a hygiene exercise to talk about with your VLEs and etc., is that when they're finished with, they should really be destroyed and deleted. So it's always good to just keep revisiting, check with your IT team, or if you run hygiene on your own sort of systems, then if it's not in use anymore and it's done and dusted, then time to remove it. And as we mentioned, you've got that 1 chapter, 1 article, 5%, whatever's the greatest. What isn't covered? Well, just a few elements here to be aware of. Workbooks, work cards, assignment sheets. If it's supposed to be a one-time deal, so it's supposed to be filled out by a student and then it's served its purpose. If you are multiplying that, then that's obviously having an impact on the earnings of that publisher. So that would be a no. So just to be clear about that, if it was a one-time use and you're multiplying it, that's then infringing on the license. Copying not permitted under the CLA license. There is some publishers or books where it will say that, or the CLA will not appear in the inside of the book. There is a permissions tool on our website which you can use. So if you wanted to check any books you're not sure about, I'll quickly show you that before we finish. It's really helpful, gives you an immediate feedback on that book, and it just takes away any doubt or worry. The newspaper, print and website versions, there is another license that we are agents for through the NLA. That allows you to work with newspapers, etc. And again, the organisations like the DFE, Scottish Government, etc., they do have the NLA licence, so it shouldn't be a problem. If they've got the CLA, they've probably more than likely got the NLA, but if you're not sure, please ask. And the last one's there, maps and charts and printed music. We don't cover printed music or the maps and charts, just to be aware of that. You need to talk to the music publishers associations for guidance if you're wanting to use that in any shape or form. Okay, just wrapping up then. So help and support. What can we offer? Well, I mentioned about the check permissions tool. It's just there on the CLA website. Basically, in the resources area, you can see there's a check permissions tool. You will identify the book or the journal, or whatever it might be. There's a number of ways you can do that, title or ISSN number, etc. Explain that you're a school and run the check. And it will bring it up for you. You'll be able to just make sure the details are accurate, and it will tell you exactly what you can do with that work. So I can see lots of green ticks there. I'm very happy because I can obviously photocopy that, scan it and read aloud. And it just also gives me a little bit of information around, just fleshing out those options as well to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. So that's on the cla.co.uk website if you've not seen that already. Last couple of things, the copyright essentials. This is also on the website. It's basically an accredited piece of CPD. It takes about 30 minutes. So from boiling the kettle, putting a cup of tea on, maybe eating a pastry, you could probably have this finished, and it might be worth sharing with colleagues in school. It gives you the basics around copyright etiquette and some elements around the CLA license. And, people find it very useful. We've had great feedback from it, and as mentioned, it's accredited, as well as the fact that you've also got sort of 30 minutes, so it's nice and quick to finish off. And then finally, teaching and learning resources. These are brand new. We just released these, I think, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Key Stage 1 up to Key Stage 4. These are free, you just download them. They are curriculum aligned. You can see there are multiple subject areas. And they are lesson plans along with the actual resources themselves. So they're fully good to go out of the box. Obviously, differentiate them for your pupils, etc. But might be worth signposting these to teaching colleagues just so they can see them, and it'll give them some really good resources around talking about copyright and permissions, etc. So that's me coming to the end. My details are there, like I said. If you do want to reach out for any reason, please do. I really would encourage you, if you've not looked on the website recently or not at all, then do have a look at the resources and the materials. Some great stuff there. And like I said, we're here to help and advise on the licenses that you've got. And if you're not sure if you've got a license, then please let us know, and we can sort of make that clear to you. But I'm going to stop talking now because I'm very aware of time as well. I don't know if there's any time for questions, Barbara. If there is any at all, they did a great job and all questions were answered. Hopefully so.
Right. I don't think there's no questions at the moment, but there's time if anybody wants to put something up. Or a couple of couple of minutes over, but we've still got a lot of people in the session, so they're obviously very engaged and interested in what you're saying. I have to admit, I didn't realise the Copyright Licensing Agency website isn't a website I go to very often, and I should imagine that's the case for most people. So I had no idea you had learning resources on there now. So I'm certainly going to be promoting these to our members. And when we send the links out, we'll put the link to the website in it and everything. Yeah, it's a really interesting area, isn't it? Because I find, and it's not just students, the teachers as well have this idea that because you can find it on the internet, it's free to use. You know, you get librarians that say, I've had a teacher ask me to find 3 copies of this book. And it's a book that's still being published. It's not that old and maybe only recently published. And they, you know, you sort of say, well, if you can find a free copy, then it's an illegal copy. And they don't seem to understand that. But the thing is, they wouldn't walk into a bookshop and take a book off the shelf and without paying for it. So I don't understand why they have this attitude with things online. It's an area that we need to sort of keep educating people in, isn't it? Anyway, let me just check that if we've got
it's actually interesting, Barbara, while you check in about the conversation with AI, because that's something that we are working on at the moment and doing a lot of focus around licensing, because it's about the training models that these AIs, what work is being used, but also the outputs as well. So fascinating area,
it's a fascinating, yeah. And I think the problem with technology, and I think this is true of all sorts of technology, is the technology comes along, people, you know, want to use it, keen to use it, and it's only after the genie's been let out of the bottle, if you like, they then say, hang on a minute, maybe we shall regulate this in some way. I think it's true, like heat pumps are a good example. You know, I couldn't have a heat pump in my house. I just don't have the capacity for it. But, you know, we're all meant to be changing to heat pumps. I'm looking in the chat. There were a couple of questions. Somebody has said about who's responsible within a school if there's a breach of copyright.
Well, I mean, again, that goes back to it. I mean, it's a civil offence. So, you know, ultimately, I was listening to a copyright lawyer the other week in a session, and ultimately they could go after anybody. You know, it depends where they feel the money is. I mean, again, that's not something we can give advice on, but
no.
You've got to be aware that there's a culpability there. You know, if you're part of that of that situation where something's been copied and you feel mindful that it's not right, then it's a civil matter. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The other question that's come up is, and I know this comes up a lot with librarian forums and things, is about book covers. Because librarians use book covers all the time for promoting books. You know, we're doing displays, we do wall displays in flyers, book lists. And I know when I review a book online, if I'm on X and Instagram, I will take a photo of the book and put that photo on, and then just say, you know, the book review. And this always comes up all the time is, can book covers be used freely? Because we don't have the time, the capacity to go to the publishers and say, can we use these book covers, please, to promote your books? I should imagine they wouldn't say no.
It's an interesting question because it's so multifaceted as well, and I think my first feeling is, and I'm going to talk to some of the bigger brains in the office because I think it's part of a bigger question, but. It's going back, I suppose, to that fair dealing. Is what you're doing is that having an effect on the income of that publisher? Is that is what you're doing? Does that sit right with a fair-minded person? Now, I know that's a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but that is sometimes the way it sort of plays out. But if you've got a copy of it, and a lot of the time if it's behind like a secure VLE or otherwise, but
I don't think it's always behind the VLE. But if you say, ask yourself, is it impacting on the income? then the answer is yes, but in a positive way, because hopefully
Like
those,
advertised.
I mean, you're promoting the book for the publisher, you're promoting the book for the author, and you
Yeah.
hope that the students will read, you will read their books, will want more of their books, maybe we'll go out and borrow them from the library, we'll buy them. So yeah, okay.
I'm not saying yes or no, but what I'm going
No,
to do, I'm going to speak to some of our legal team and just because like I say, Barbara, it's a really fascinating question. It's part of the
yeah,
bigger
yeah.
query around, how do we sort of display and illustrate these books that we've got? So I'll come back to you with an answer
Yeah,
on that,
brilliant. That's
and you can
fantastic.
then share it out as you need to be.
Right. I don't think there's lots of people saying thank you very much. They found it both sessions very interesting. And so I think it's now 10 past, so we are sort of over time. So I'm going to wind up now, just say thank you to Andrea and Laura and James again. Really interesting. And we've had good feedback on our chat as well, and lots of useful links and information to give our members. So thank you so much. For a really interesting webinar. Thank you.
Welcome. Everyone, have a lovely
Thanks.
evening.